This is Read with Bree. I am back with part two. I am reading Get Low by Darren Coleman. Again, we are picking up right where we left off at. Please, if you have not listened to part one, definitely listen to part one. It is chapters one, two, and I will be picking up on chapter three. Also, again, I am just reading for fun as a hobby, so everything will not be 100%, and some words will definitely be bleeped out to go ahead and comply with YouTube. So I'll go ahead and get started. Chapter 3, On My Own. By the time spring reached full effect, my mother was so busy trying to have a life that she all but forgotten about me. Now that her divorce from my father was final, all she could think about was her wedding. Things had gotten bad between us, so I didn't meet much resistance when I packed up and left my mother's house for days at a time as she prepared for her big day with Dean. Nick's mom, Miss Patty, I called her, had all but let me move in with them, but that arrangement came to an end abruptly when Nick got caught skipping school having sex with Ivan. Her mother came home from work early and caught her bent over in the shower with Ivan plowing into her. She didn't come right out and say it, but I knew she blamed me for Neek's change in behavior. She should have blamed it. Neek was sprung, and that didn't have anything to do with me. Miss Patty had to know that good bitch would make a little girl start doing all kinds of grown-up stuff. Get her thinking she's a woman when she's still a kid. Lucky for me, I guess, my mother hadn't given up our apartment yet. It seemed more luck for her best friend Julie and her son, the buck-toothed retard Jasper. They were the victims of a fire 3 weeks before my mom was to marry Dean. She let Julie move into her two-bedroom on the condition that I be allowed to keep my room and stay there until the end of the school year. It took a little getting used to having Jasper in the house, but to be honest, I liked the arrangement. Julie stayed out of my way, and Jasper was so quiet that if I wasn't tripping over him every time I walked past the sofa where he slept and kept himself playing at every waking moment, I wouldn't have known he was there. During the next few months, it seemed as if I was slowly beginning to raise myself, barely talking to my mother, and never giving Julie the level of respect that I probably should have. Though she was the closest thing I had to a legal guardian once my mother married Dean, I never asked permission. I simply told her what I was doing. It was the week of spring break, and as usual, I announced to Julie that I was heading out to Neek's for the night. She'd been on punishment forever, and a day it seems like since she got caught fucking. I met her on the corner at the halfway point between our apartments. Together we trotted to the 2 blocks to where Ivan and Tony were waiting. Tony smiled as I approached the car. "Hey, sexy," he said. "Hey, you." I smiled back as I approached the door. Neek piled in the back, and we pulled off slowly as he leaned in for a kiss. I quickly Frenched him, tongue swirling deep inside each other's mouth, and then we pulled away as if one of us had a plane to catch. I never expected Tony and I to end up together after the way we met, but they say persistence breaks down resistance, and so it was with he and I. Ivan and Neek have been inseparable since they met. Ivan and Tony were always together, so even though we didn't like each other at the start, we found ourselves constantly in each other's company. With all the tagging along as the third and fourth wheel, he and I wound up kicking it by default. Tony wasn't as bad as I thought initially. Not only was he handsome, the boy could actually hold a decent conversation as long as I kept the subject off of anything that had to do with school. Best of all, he kept a pocket full of money. Even though I didn't really care for the tough guy routine he was always trying to portray, I got used to it. He was a die-hard Tupac fan and was doing his best to live the thug life. "Y'all hungry?" Ivan asked as we headed out towards Virginia. "Always," Neek replied. "Good. We're going to hit a seafood spot out in Alexandria before we hit the hotel then," Tony said. They were always taking us to nice restaurants. It was like we were dating grown men. Ivan, with his intellectual side, always had some fascinating intellectual conversation. Tony, for his part, carried himself like a man who done 10 years in jail, and was now living life as if there was no tomorrow. I couldn't believe that Neek was now so willing to give her goodies up on demand, but it was clear that Ivan had her nose wide open. She gone from the last virgin on the block to his other toy. I wasn't sure if it was the trials I faced in the last 9 months or hanging around Tony all the time, but I changed too. I knew that I started to get wild. For starters, I was drinking every time we hung out, and once I let Tony become my second lover, I couldn't front. I wanted sex all the time. At first, I think it was simply the rush I felt during the act that helped me escape the pain in my life. But as time went on, I started to realize that I simply loved the way a hot penis felt inside me. At the Chart House, an upscale seafood restaurant near the waterfront, we ate steak and lobster tails. I watched in amazement as Tony pulled out a huge wad of cash to pay the $300 tab before we jetted out of the restaurant. A short while later, we pulled into the parking lot of the Holiday Inn on Telegraph Road. We sat in the car while Ivan went in and secured the rooms. He came back out and Nick's eyes lit up as if she hit the lottery. She was in love. "It's about damn time," Tony said. "Where's my change?" Ivan handed him a 20 and a key. "Pull around to the back," he said. "The rooms are on the other side." Once we parked, the two of them climbed out of the car, stepped a few feet away from us, and began to talk amongst themselves. Tony burst into laughter as Ivan shook his head no. I paid them no attention. A few moments later, I watched as Nick and Ivan entered their rooms, 5 doors up the hall. Tony and I entered our door, and the first thing I noticed was that the room was ice cold. "Who the hell left the air conditioner on like it's summertime out here?" Tony laughed. "Don't worry, I'ma heat you up." Then he went over and cut it off, turning on the heat. "I'ma take a shower real quick. You want to get in with me?" I nodded as I continued rubbing my shoulders, trying to keep warm. He switched the clock radio on to WPGC and turned the lights off. Silk's "Lose Control" was playing. I loved that song and started to feel sexy as soon as the words started flowing from the tiny box. It was almost 10 p.m., and the only light in the room was shining in through the curtains from outside. Even still, I could see clearly as Tony began to strip. He pulled off his shirt, and then I watched as his jeans and boxers dropped to the floor together. "Take your clothes off." He smiled at me and headed into the bathroom. I wasn't shy. The fact of the matter was that Tony's attention only caused me to gain even more confidence in my body. When I walked into the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror, I could see Tony's reflection, even with the steam now covering the glass. He was staring at me from the shower. I slid my skin-tight yellow Guess jeans off and watched how hungry Tony looked as my thick bottom began to pop out of the top of my jeans. I took my time, wiggling my ass a bit as I fought to get the jeans down to my ankles. I pretended to be looking at my lips in the mirror as I pulled my shirt off and unhooked my bra. Still slowly moving, I turned slightly to the side, giving him a side view of my beautiful 34D globes. "Hey, come on, hurry up," he said. I had my fun torturing him. I dropped my panties and turned to face him. Once I climbed into the hot water, I reached for him to steady myself as my feet hit the bottom of the tub. As I turned to soak my body, I brushed up against him and discovered that he was already rock hard. The beads of steaming water pelted my shoulders and sent the chill rushing from my body. Still, my nipples stood off my chest as if we were at the North Pole. Tony grabbed me by the waist and pulled me to him. He landed a kiss on me, and he began groping my body as if he hadn't touched a woman in months. "Let me wash up first, Tony," I begged. He backed away and smiled. "Let me help." He grabbed a bar of soap, made a handful of lather, and went predictably for my breast. He spun me around and soaked me up while I pushed my rear end into his crouch. "Is this what you want?" I said seductively. "Hell yeah," he whispered. It didn't take long for me to get turned on, especially when Tony acted so aggressively. "Then get it then," I said. I didn't have to tell him twice as he grabbed me by my hair and forced me to bend over. I held onto the sides of the tub as I felt the tip of his dick pushing into my pussy. He wasn't graceful. Instead, I felt as if he was in a race to huff my brains out. A few slow and ordered strokes to start with was all I got before he began smashing in and out of me. I wasn't as turned on as he was to start, but I began to catch up as he began to groan and talk with the nasty lingo I began to love. Nia, this pussy is so good. All I did was grunt and return with fuck me, fuck me. Oh yeah, take this dick, Nia, take it. Fuck me harder, Tony. Pussy. It's so tight. Through the furious action, I had to fight to keep my balance in the shower. Nearly slipping didn't stop me from urging him to hit it harder. He continued to bang for a few moments more before he grunted out, "Ah, yeah." He slammed into me a few more times before pulling his limp penis from inside me. Leaning under the water, he said, "That shit was good." I nodded, more winded than satisfied. I hope he have another few rounds in him. I stepped out of the shower, took a seat on the toilet, and forced myself to pee and do my best to squeeze my vaginal muscles to force it to come out of me. Tony had taught me this method of birth control. He called this making the booty spit up. I climbed back into the shower as he was getting out. It took me another 5 minutes to wash up and get fresh for him again. After I finished, I headed to the bed to join him and found him flat on his face, already snoring. I took it as a compliment and slid onto the bed next to him. I didn't bother looking at the clock. Instead, I closed my eyes as I listened to Brownstone played on the radio. I was amused as usual. Tony would wake me for another round or two, or at least I hoped, since I had some energy left to burn. With that thought, I drifted off beside him. We could have been asleep for more than 30 minutes when a series of hard knocks came at the door. I was startled as Tony sat up in the bed. "What the fuck?" he mumbled out. He got up and walked to the door to look out the peephole. "Who is it? Is it Ivan?" I asked. "No, it ain't," he said as he backed away from the door. "Shit, shit, shit," he repeated in a whisper. "What's wrong?" I asked as the knocks came again. "It's a guy I know, named Ali. I owe him some money." "Well, how did he know we were here?" "I'm not sure. Maybe somebody saw me walk in," he shot back. "He has a lot of eyes in this town." "Well, don't let him come." I was interrupted by the set of knocks. "T, I know you in there." I watched as Tony quickly put his clothes on and said, "I'ma step outside. You just chill. I'll be back in a minute after I talk with him." Tony opened the door. "Hey, Ali," I heard him say. Like a scene out of a movie, I watched him start backing into the room with his hands up in front of his face. Ali had a pistol aimed at him, and when he looked over at me, he shook his head, giving me the feeling that I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I began to panic as I thought about the night my father was shot. "I'm not here to do a bunch of talking," Ali barked. "Do you have my money?" "I have most of it, but not on me. I have everything but 2 G's." "That's not enough, Holmes," he said. "I'll tell you what. I'll sit here with your girl, and if you come back with all of it in an hour or less, then everything is cool. If you don't, then shit is going to get super ugly." His tone was deathly serious. He looked to be at least 20 years old, with a mustache and a goatee. Tony looked to have gotten himself in trouble with a grown man. Ali stood around 6 feet tall and had the body of an athlete. Tony wasn't a slouch, but it looked as though Ali could have easily taken him without a gun. I was too scared to speak. Instead, I thought about my clothes on the bathroom floor. I was covered in a sheet, but I felt more naked than I've ever been. I couldn't believe what I heard next when Tony said, "Just don't hurt her. I'll get the money." My eyes nearly bugged out of my head as I stared at him. "Are you really going to leave me alone with this man?" I was still yet to say a word. The fear had literally paralyzed my vocal cords. "Nia, I'll be right back, I promise." Ali took a seat as if he paid for the room and set his gun on the table. He looked at his watch and said, 1 hour. You got 1 hour. Tony stood, staring at me for a second. My eyes watered as I wish I'd never gotten involved with him. It was at that moment that I realized that I didn't really even like him all that much. At least not enough to be held hostage for this drug debt. Time is fucking ticking, Ali said. Then he added, Tony, you know how I roll. If you don't come back, I might start with her, but I won't stop there. As easy as I found you here, I know where your sister lives, your grandmother's house. Man, I just told you I got you, he said, with a pitiful look on his face, and added, Nia, I'm sorry, I'll be right back. He picked his keys up and headed for the door. Still in bed, I laid there for a couple minutes as Ali and I made contact. He pulled out a joint and lit it. Maria, he said as he took the first puff, I'm not going to hurt you. I just want him to think I will so that he'll bring me my money. I would hurt him, though, he added. He took a couple more pulls of the weed. I looked into his eyes. I believed his words. I don't know why, but I corrected him. Nia. My name is Nia, not Maria. He nodded. Yeah, whatever. He looked at his watch again. You smoke? I shook my head no. Well, try it. It'll help you relax. I didn't respond, so he added, It's harmless. Really, it is. Just try a little puff. No thanks, really. His face frowned up a bit. Then he insisted, Come on. You can trust me. I didn't want to, but I was nervous as hell, and I didn't want to offend him or anger him. He moved over to the bed and extended his arm towards me, with only his fingertips holding the joint. Why the fuck your hands shaking like that? You got a nervous condition or something? He asked as I reached for it. I shrugged my shoulders and took the joint from him. I guess I'm a little nervous. Fuck that. I told you I'm not going to do anything to hurt you as long as you stay cool. I put it to my mouth and he said, Pull the smoke into your mouth, then inhale real slow like. I sucked the smoke down my throat. It burned, and I began to cough uncontrollably. He laughed at me as my eyes began to water. Try it again, Ali said. The second time, I pulled softer, and the cannabis slid into my lungs much more smoothly. Instantly, I felt different. I actually felt good, instantly mellow, no longer scared or nervous. Ali had given me something good, I believed. I looked at him, and for the first moment since he'd been in the room, I realized that he wasn't scary, but rather handsome and strong. I smiled, closed my eyes, and embraced that I liked the way I felt. Discovering that drugs can help you get through an uncomfortable situation was like riding a raft over a waterfall. Life would never be the same after that. 20 minutes later, I was wondering what in God's name he'd given me to smoke. My head was spinning as if I were on a ride at Six Flags. I never imagined that marijuana would get my head going like it was now. I was two steps beyond relaxed. I felt like I was sailing in the clouds, and I really had nothing to go on except for my guesses as to what it would feel like being high. What confirmed for me that I wasn't in my right mind was when Ali leaned in and kissed me. I didn't resist him. Instead, I pulled away after a couple seconds and started laughing. What are you doing? I asked, still giggling. What do you think? He answered back. You're sexy. Yeah, thanks, but I'm too young for you. Well, what are you doing in this hotel room naked if you're too young? I sat silent. He had a good point. I stood up to go to the bathroom to retrieve my clothes, forgetting that I was buck naked. You're right, I need to go. I gotta get my clothes. When he saw my body, he yelled out, Oh shit, girl, you stack like a fiddlebucker. I might have blushed at the compliment, but before I could, he jumped up in front of me, blocking my path. You ain't going no fucking where. Please let me go. He slid to the side of my path, and I tried to make it past him when he reached for my ponytail and yanked me back on the bed. Instantly, my heart began to beat. Get off me, I huffed out. He grabbed me and pulled my mouth to his. He forced my lips apart and began to tongue me into submission. His hands were all over my body, and my first instinct was to pull away, but when he reached for my pussy, he found a puddle on my outer lips. He sent two fingers inside of me and almost lifted me off the ground by my vagina. The fear was about to set in as he shoved me onto my back. The drugs had me moving as if I was in quicksand. He pulled his shirt over his head and dropped his pants to the ground in a matter of seconds. I watched in the now dimly lit room as his meat escaped from his boxers. He had a pole hanging between his legs, and I had to adjust my eyes to make sure I wasn't seeing things. Ali, please, let me just get my clothes, I pleaded in my most sincere voice. If he had let me, I would have rushed to put them on. He didn't, and instead he climbed onto the bed and pinned me down. He started with the kissing again, and this time I began to tremble, a mix of fear, shame, and excitement rushing through me at once. I would wait for the right moment to try and break free. He fondled my breasts, licking my Hershey brown nipples until they were like missiles ready to launch. Then he began to finger me again while I tried to resist the urge to moan out in pleasure. When I couldn't jerk away and kicked him, I rolled off the bed on the other side and prepared to make a run for the bathroom. I'm going to yell, I threatened, and I will kill you. It was then that I realized his gun was on the table. I looked over at it, and as my feet began to move towards it, he lunged out at me and grabbed my shoulders and hair once again. This time he hurt me as he used a firm grip. "Now you done pissed me off, you little bitch," he whispered. "I was going to go easy on you, but now—" He didn't finish his sentence. His strength became apparent as he locked his hand on my jugular and began to choke this shit out of me. A minute later, he had me flat on my back, hands still on my throat as he separated my thighs. My chest was heaving as the tears began to come. He wasn't tuned in to my feelings as he rubbed the head of his huge dick at the opening of my treasure. He tried to push it in, and I flinched. It wasn't going to fit. The next thing I felt was his goatee brushing against my thighs. It tickled slightly, but the feeling of his hair on my skin was nothing compared to the moment his tongue brushed against my clit. I had never experienced such sensations like this. 3 licks and my clit was swollen, even though I tried to fight it. Once he realized my body was responding, his assault on my pearl became even more deadly. Though my hands were free, I didn't use them to fight or try to push him away. Again, I held back the signs of pleasure as best I could, but he ate me like he was being paid for it. I began to breathe like a marathon runner struggling towards the finish line. Then I began to grasp as if all the air were being sucked out of the hotel room. His hand slid from my ankles to my ass, and I thought about trying to buck away, but the heat of his tongue and his ability to use it the way Michelangelo used a paintbrush unleashed the tiny bolts of electricity that would surely clear the path for a body-stirring orgasm. I had already learned how to give myself one that was intense, but I yet to have one delivered to the magnitude that I felt approaching. I opened my eyes and looked down at the top of his head. He was so into sucking me inside out that I forgot that I was in the middle of being raped. I became nothing but a lump of flesh wanting to hump his face. "Oh shit," I yelled as a spark hit me. "Mm-hmm," he mumbled, nose deep in my hole. "No, please," I cried out. The juices were pouring out of me, mine mixed with his saliva, out of my girl, between my ass cheeks and onto the bed so rapidly that it didn't even make sense. With no attempt at finesse, he suddenly jammed 4 fingers inside of me, scratching my hole into a new state of arousal. "Fuck," I yelled out. "I'm getting you ready for this monster," he barked out. More licking and finger fucking followed until he caused me to start to spasm. My eyes rolled up into my head and I lost myself to the orgasm. It started in my chest and ripped down through my stomach muscles. I wanted to grab his head and pull his tongue deeper into my piece, but I was paralyzed. I felt so controlled, so helpless. I thought about his aggression, how he began to devour me as if I were no more than a piece of meat. When my mind stuck on how he'd taken control of my body, like a river raging over rocks, I came so incredibly hard. "Ah, shit," I painted out over and over as my ass took on mind of its own and started bouncing off of the bed to meet the thrust of his tongue. I didn't know if it was Ali, the weed, or a combination, but the coming had me seeing colors inside of my eyelids as my pizza officially turned into a water ride. Orange, white, yellow, red. Ouch, he said. I hadn't realized how violently I had shaken until he screamed out. My eyes opened and I gazed into his. During my orgasm, he had bitten his tongue. Still, he smiled as he moved up the bed towards me. I was still reeling from my orgasm, but I knew that he was about to fuck me. I momentarily came back into my senses and made it off the bed once again. My knees were wobbly still from the pleasure that had wrecked my body, so I moved like a wounded animal as I tried to make it past him. Once again, I felt his hands pulling my hair. He led me back, but stopped short of throwing me down onto the bed. With his forearm, he folded me over onto my knees and he positioned himself behind me. My knees were locked together as I tried to cross my legs under me, but it did no good. I was slightly bow-legged and had a heart-shaped ass. When I bent over like this, my pussy was wide open like a garage door. Ali couldn't have known this detail of my anatomy, but still he took advantage of the easy access, pressing the thick head of his dick to the opening and plunging in. I imagined my Tony walking into the room, seeing me bent over like this. I wonder what he'd think about my moaning out in pleasure as Ali fucked me and groped my breast. Only a whore will enjoy this, I thought to myself. I felt pounds of guilt with each delicious stroke. It wasn't my fault. I hadn't cheated, but I couldn't deny. I loved it, and I was both surprised and disgusted with myself at the same time. I never imagined that I would enjoy being huffy like this. My knees were bent slightly as Ali slammed into me rhythmically. I wanted more, deeper, and harder. Huffy, I grunted, wishing I could massage my own nipples, but he pulled my hands behind my back. What? He shot back, his hand firmly wrapped up in my hair. If he had had weave in it, it would have given away with his yanking. What did you say? He panted. Oh, I groaned. Say it again. Come on, bitch. I had never had anyone talk to me like that. I winced as his vulgarity took me higher. He proceeded to bang me for 10 minutes straight. His positioning in and out of me sent me to the edge a couple of times, but I felt something bubbling inside of me on its way out. Oh God, I was fighting for air as the pillows underneath me pressed against my abdomen. He leaned in more and smashed my face into the mattress. Fuck me. Keep up me. Yeah, bitch, you love it. Tell me you love it. Ah, ah. Another orgasm was approaching. Say it, he yelled as he slammed in balls deep. I love it. I yelled over and over as I yanked all over his dick. I felt myself ready to black out, but fought to stay with him and give him the release I now felt he deserved. I clenched my young muscles. With the third squeeze, he moaned out, I'm coming, shorty. The pace of his pumps quickened to turbo, and he exploded all inside my womb. I loved what he had done to me, and the feel of his spasm sent me over the top once more. I pushed my backside into him, causing my cheeks to clap while we collided. He was now the helpless one as he humped through another orgasm until he nearly collapsed. We melted into each other and dozed off. When I woke up 2 hours later, I hadn't heard the door open, but I heard it as it slammed shut. A second later, Tony was standing at the foot of the bed. I looked up at him and then over at Ali, who was still sleeping beside me, as I asked naked. Oh shit, I said, realizing Tony could see that I allowed Ali to fuck me silly a while earlier. Tony's eyes locked in his mind as he came to the realization of what happened. In a voice that showed his complete shock at the scene before him, he simply yelled out, What the fuck? Chapter 4 Road Rage. On the morning of my 16th birthday, Ali drove me out to Washington Boulevard in Arlington, Virginia. He promised me that he had a surprise for me that I'd never forget. After admiring a tennis bracelet that I seen at a jewelry store a couple of weeks prior, I thought we were headed to Boston Commons to pick it up, but I was wrong. I had forgotten the scenery on the way to the mall for the fact that it had never meant much to me as a 15-year-old. When we pulled into the car lot on Clarendon Boulevard, my eyes widened. We hopped out of Ali's Pathfinder. A foreign practically tripped over his own feet trying to get out of the tiny office onto the lot. He smiled and said, "Eileen, my man, you're early." "Huh?" "The car is almost ready. I told you I was going to have it detailed for you. It'll be looking like new. It'll be here by noon. How about I buy you lunch and we'll be back in an hour," Ali said. He handed him a lump of cash. "That's the rest." "Thank you, Ali." We pulled off and drove towards the mall. Ali looked pissed. "What's wrong, baby?" He loved when I called him baby. "These damn Sudan Hussein looking fuckers. I told him I wanted the car ready when we pulled up. I wanted to surprise you." "With a car?" He nodded. "Oh my God, Ali, a car?" I screamed all giddy. "What kind?" "At least that will be a surprise. You'll see when we get back." I got to know a lot about Ali over the past couple of months. He was strong and commanded respect in the streets. He was also extremely loyal and kind to the few people he dealt with. It took him a little while to open up, but when he did tell me a little bit about his family life, I felt bad for him. After moving from Pittsburgh to D.C. as a toddler, his mother ran into a string of bad luck. She turned to drugs, got into an abusive relationship, and forgot all about him until he started getting into trouble. By the time Ali turned 11, he had gotten a rap sheet several pages long. Tired of social services on her back, his mother moved without telling him when he was 14. Ali wound up living with his uncle until he was 15. He'd been on his own since then. From that point on, he bounced from couch to couch until he got into a relationship with his caseworker. She'd taken him in after seeing the size of his penis during a urine test. She was 15 years older than him, and still she cried like a baby the day he left her to marry the streets. Ali never said it, but I figured that at the very least she schooled him in the art of making love. He loved sex and could fuck like a champion. In fact, I felt like he had taught me more than any girl my age should know about sex. But most of all, he was generous. Even still, I couldn't believe he was buying me a car after only knowing me for a short while. As we pulled into the garage, I thought about that night when Tony came back to the hotel with Ali's money. Ali took the $100 that Tony had paid for the room out of the stack and handed it to him. Then, as if he had every right to do so, he told Tony to bounce. Tony had stared at me like a puppy dog and said, "Come on, Nia, get dressed." "Nah, without her. She with Ali now," he responded. I said nothing. A part of me was scared of how it would all turn out. But I couldn't fake. My we still wanted to stay with Ali, so I didn't move. Tony's voice was cracking as he said, "Ali, I paid you, man. That's my girl." Ali just laughed. "Man, she ain't your girl. Plus, you don't want to hit that after me. She just took 10.5 thick inches with no problem," he gloated. Tony looked at me as if I were scum. I sat up in bed and stared back at him as I witnessed a familiar look. His pride had been destroyed, and he wore the same expression that my father had after catching my mother and Dean. Only Tony didn't have the heart that my father did. Instead of regaining his dignity through animalistic means, he turned and walked away. The next morning, Ali taught me how to properly give a blowjob. He tried to pull away when he came, but he held my head on his shaft as he filled my mouth with his seed. After that, he insisted on me choking down his meat as a precursor to sex nearly every time. Through the period where Ali called himself breaking me in, the rough sex continued, and I loved every minute of it. We spent an hour in the mall, but didn't find anything worth buying other than a few CDs. My mind was on the car. I couldn't wait to see what he had bought for me. When we pulled back up to the lot, there was a champagne-colored Acura Legend coupe. It really did look brand new. I was so excited that I jumped up and down and screamed, "Thank you, baby. Thank you so much." Eileen let out a rare smile and said, "You're welcome. Now all you have to do is get your license. I'm going to take you this afternoon." I was in heaven as I followed Ali down Glebe Road, headed back towards I-395. I popped in the TLC's Crazy Sexy Cool CD and skipped to my favorite song, Waterfalls. I was blasting the music as I cruised behind his truck as if I'd been driving for years. It was my day, and I couldn't wait to get back around the way to show my girls my new whip. When we made it to my street, Ali parked his truck and climbed in with me. He looked over at me with a stern look. I paid close attention to his expression. With his dark skin, he reminded me of the younger Michael Jordan with the tongue wagging one with hair. I thought he was a beautiful specimen, even though he was a little scary at times, always seeming like he was holding back some deep, dark side of his personality. Okay, these are the rules. I sat there waiting, ready for him to tell me what time to be in the house every night and how many times a day I have to check in. Uh-huh, I said, willing to obey anything he asked. He paused and smiled again. Just have fun and enjoy the car. Then he added, be careful. I smiled and leaned in and kissed him. So are we going to practice my parking now? In just a minute. Right now, I want you to pull around a corner and pull the car through the alley. Driving slowly, I obliged him until he told me where to stop. He climbed out and motioned for me to join him behind the car. Once I stood before him, he grabbed a fistful of my hair, his trademark move. In one swift motion, he turned me around, bending me over the trunk of the car. With his free hand, he pulled my jean skirt up and yanked my panties clean off. Stop, someone will see us, I clear moaned. Shut the fuck up, he snapped back. A second later, my eyes were rolling into my head as he pushed his dick inside of me right there in broad daylight. As usual, he set me off on a journey toward orgasmic delight. He pounded me without shame as my silk began to throb. A minute into his fucking me, someone walked up the alley. It was a couple, a woman and a man with a shopping bag in his hand. I was completely embarrassed. They're going to see us, I said in a whisper. It didn't bother Allie as he continued on. I wanted to turn invisible once they made it to us. The woman stopped stunned at the sight of our lovemaking. She grabbed her man by the arm. I didn't recognize either of them, thank goodness. I heard him say, damn. She followed with, James, come on. Fuck nasty ass. Her words didn't shame me. The fact that they were watching actually turned me on in some strange way. My silky began to do somersaults, and I relaxed enough to have a small girl orgasm as Ali emptied himself all over my ass cheeks. Sweating like a pig, I jumped off of the hot car and climbed into the passenger seat as fast as possible. I didn't say a word as we drove off. After 5 minutes of silence, he looked over at me and turned the music down. What, you mad? He asked. Not saying a word, I turned and looked out the window, smiling. Every now and then I like to play the mad role. It usually got him trying hard to spoil me in an effort to make up to me. A few seconds before I let him know that I wasn't mad, he said, hey, after you pass the test, let's go get that bracelet you wanted. On top of that, he was beyond patient as we practiced my driving and parallel parking in the RFK Stadium parking lot. An hour later, with his dry gum all over his arm, I passed my driver's test. Our next stop was the mall. Shantae was way too pressed to read my registration. When she saw Nia Morgan on the temporary registration, her face got tighter than a weightlifter's ass. What shit? You thought I was lying? I laughed as I reached back into the back seat to retrieve the slip from her. Neek was, of course, riding shotgun, and Brandy was in the back with Shantae. We were painting the town red in celebration of my birthday. I had a pocket full of cash, compliments of Ali, and looking like $1 million, rocking a pair of Dolce& and Gabbana jeans and a BCBG shirt and a fresh pair of Gucci sneakers. Without thinking twice, I introduced my crew to the potent weed that Ali gave me. He bragged that he had some peats from Humboldt County in California. It was a place I couldn't have pointed out on a map, but I did know that they had some of the strongest weed in the country. At least Ali preached that every time he inhaled the chiba, and I believed him. Me and my girls didn't smoke enough to lose our minds right away, but we did get high enough to get the munchies. We saved the rest of the smoke for the ride to the club, just in case we couldn't get a drink once we got inside the club. I was pissed when we couldn't get in Houston's with it out in adult, but we wound up at TGIF Fridays on Pennsylvania Avenue, near George Washington University. Acting like we had eaten in weeks, we ordered a bunch of food that we practically inhaled before going to a club out of Maryland called the Classics. The Northeast Groovers were playing, and the place was bound to be packed. The line was out the door as we cruised into the lot. I felt like a celebrity about to walk the red carpet as the bystanders were all staring at us as we pulled up. Sometimes everything went right, and this was one of those times. There was a parking space right in the front row near the door waiting for me. I backed in carefully and we sat there for a moment, making sure our hair was in place and that our lip gloss was perfect.
Y'all bitches ready? I asked. You know it, Brandy shot back. We climbed out and we were greeted with a chorus of dams and heys from niggas in line. I couldn't blame them or the older chicks who I overheard using words like teeny boppers. Hell, we were that, but boppers or not, my jeans were fitting so damn perfect that I could have stopped traffic, caused a wreck, and gotten a ticket. Nikki's were on display as usual in her low cut sundress, and Brandy, though slim as she was stunningly pretty. She had a face like Pocahontas. Shantae, who I thought usually dressed like a skank, even looked good in her yellow Versace jeans and the halter top that she was rocking. We walked straight to the door, and I told the doorman that Ali had sent us and he had let us in, no charge, no ID. Once we made it in, I found the table near the windows in the front of the club. The room was shaped like a spaceship, with windows covering every wall. I greeted Ali's connect at the club, a guy named JR, once he noticed us. A few minutes later, JR had a waitress bring a cake and a bottle of Moet from the kitchen. I couldn't believe it when he told me that Ali had the cake delivered. In pink icing, the cake read Happy 21st birthday on it. Ali know good and well that I was sweet 16, but that wouldn't have flown too well at the club. We had a blast sipping the bubbly, clicking glasses, and acting like grown ass women. The party was just getting started when I heard a familiar voice from behind me. Happy birthday, cousin. I looked up, and it was my cousin Harold. Two of his friends that I didn't recognize, and none other than DeMarcus. I jumped up and hugged him. Hey, Harold, I said, girl, you pissy drunk, ain't you? Ain't a word, my nigga, I giggled. So what's up? I see you doing it big, sipping the mo and whatnot. That ain't nothing. Check these out, I said, and I dangled my keys up. I caught DeMarcus staring at me, but I ignored him. What you got there? Come here. I grabbed his hand and pulled him to the window. You see that right there? That's my new ride. Yeah, right, he said. Do I got to take you out there and see the registration? That's my shit. My nigga bought it for me. It's like that? It's like that, I shot back. Well, it looks like life is treating you well. I can't complain. Come on, have some cake. It's good shit. We rejoined the crowd, and as I should have expected, Shantae was all up in DeMarcus' face. I don't know if it was the liquor or me feeling territorial, but I rolled up on him and squeezed asses. He jumped as if he had been violated and turned around. I started laughing. Shantae rolled her eyes and I laughed at her, letting her know that I didn't give a damn how she felt. Hey, Nia, DeMarcus said. Long time no hear from. I said, yeah, it's been a while. Happy birthday, by the way. Thanks. He and I had tried to keep in contact after the cookout, but with everything I had been going through with my father, I was too emotionally spent to allow him to bond with me the way he was trying to. Eventually, I wore him out. A little more than a month after we had met, and I had given him my virginity, the phone calls and interest seemed to trail off completely. So you been all right, I hear? DeMarcus asked. You here? Yeah, Shantae just told me your man copped you a brand new Acura coupe for your birthday. I smacked my lips and looked at her real hard. She turned away. Something like that. So what's up? You want to get on the floor with the birthday girl? We can definitely do that. I took DeMarcus by the hand and waved for everyone else to follow us to the floor. It's on now, y'all, Brandy yelled out. A minute later, after trudging through the crowd, we all made our way on the floor and began to dance. It seemed more like we were swaying together like a church choir, since we were all jammed together like sardines and there was no room to really dance. Staring into DeMarcus' face, I was taken back to where we first laid eyes on each other. Even though both of our lives had kept moving, I hadn't forgotten him. He put his hands on my waist, and his eyes looked as if he drifted off somewhere far away. Are you okay? I leaned in close to his ear and asked him. Yeah, why do you ask? You look like something is on your mind, I said back. It's just that you look so good. I mean, you grown like shit. I can't believe it. You was tight last year, but now you have a body like one of those chicks from the videos. I guess that's a compliment. He smiled and said, you've gotten even prettier and your body has. He didn't finish his sentence before I felt something wet splash across my face. I broke the embrace and noticed that DeMarcus had liquid running down the side of his face as well. We looked over, and there was none other than Tony standing there with an empty glass in his hand, laughing. I looked around to see if Ivan was nearby and how he managed to let his monkey get out of control, but I didn't see him. Instead, I saw a bunch of other thuggish looking guys surrounding Tony. They probably giving him some courage, but still, I wasn't scared. I seen the real Tony that night in the hotel. Nigga, what the fuck was the problem? I asked. My bad, y'all. He laughed and then added it slipped. You was a black off nigga, I barked. I said it slipped, bitch. Don't get slapped up in here. DeMarcus stepped in front of me and said, "Man, you ain't gonna slap nobody over here. Slim, I know you ain't over here trying to fight for this freak, cause he shit whore. Man, you don't know her. Oh, I know her, your freak ass. My man know her, and my other man too. We ran a G on that," he said, lying. "Everybody around the way know Miss Nia." DeMarcus looked at me with disappointment on his face, as if he was contemplating believing Tony's story. "That nigga is lying." I turned to Tony and said, "I'ma tell Ali and he's gonna fuck you up. He's gonna light your bad shit up and make you cry again. Yeah, nigga, I heard you cry like a shit." With that comment on his face frowned up, and he lunged for me, only to be wobbled by DeMarcus' left fist landing on his chin. DeMarcus followed with the right hook, and Tony fell backwards. The dance floor cleared out around us like a pack of wolves. Tony's friends swarmed DeMarcus and began to pound him. Instead of folding up, DeMarcus fought back as if he had a point to prove. A second later, I was thrown to the floor by the movement of the crowd. By the time I climbed to my feet, I saw my cousin and his crew rushing into battle. I began to scream for help, but none came fast enough, and I saw Harold go down after being hit with a barrage of punches. My instincts kicked in, and I scrambled for a weapon. I saw a glass on the floor near my feet, so I grabbed it and I moved towards the rumble. Harold was balled up on the floor as a fat dude kicked him. I made him my target and swung the glass at his face. He didn't see me coming, and the glass connected on his face along with my hand. I didn't let it go, banging it into his face a second time. I hadn't realized it, but the first contact caused the glass to break, making the second contact more of a stabbing. As the jagged edge of the glass hit the fat boy in the eye, blood began to shoot out of his face like a water fountain. Suddenly, like an elephant hit with a poisoned dart, he collapsed to the floor. I was in a frenzied mode as I attacked a second man. When the glass sliced him on the back of his neck, he stopped his attack and tried to find out what happened to him. What had happened would require 30 stitches. Only one guy still fought Harold, who was slowly trying to get off the floor. A moment later, the security guards were there breaking it up. I looked over, and to my surprise, DeMarcus had held his own and was giving Tony a beating. Not asking who started it, the mountain-sized men with the t-shirts and flashlights were escorting everyone involved out the door. I was looking for my girls when one of the guards grabbed me by my arm and nearly tore it out of the socket. "You have to go." "What?" He didn't repeat himself as he pulled me to the door. The next thing I knew, there was on the steps at the front of the door. "Damn," someone said, pointing at my shirt. I hadn't realized that I had cut my hand as well. I was wiping the blood on my shirt and my pants, waiting for it to clout as I stopped the dripping from my palm. I looked down and saw a river of blood on my midsection and on my jeans. It startled me to see so much blood, not because it was coming from me, but because I was sure I looked like an axe murderer. The door swung open, and I saw Harold, DeMarcus, and one of their friends get pushed out of the door. "You okay?" I asked Harold. His eyes were swelling, and his mouth was bleeding. "Yeah, yeah, I'm tight," he lied. They had him fucked up, but not DeMarcus. He looked like he was ready to go another 5 rounds. "You all need to leave the premises." I looked up to see PG County officer. "Unless you want to take a ride with us. Come on, y'all, before we get brutalized by PG's finest. Y'all know how them motherfuckers be pressed to beat on somebody's ass and lie on you," DeMarcus said loud enough for them to hear. He was a gangster, and I didn't even know it. The door opened again, and Brandy, Shantae, and Neek stepped out of the door. "I was about to leave y'all bitches," Harold and DeMarcus escorted us to the car. DeMarcus opened the door for me. "DeMarcus, call me when you get in." "I will." He gave me a hug. "Take Harold to the hospital." I was thinking that I might need to do that. "And what about your hand?" I grabbed a small towel from the trunk and wrapped it up. "It should be okay." We hugged and parted ways. We piled into the car and started the engine. That shit crazy, Brandy said. Yo, that nigga DeMarcus was handling them niggas. DeMarcus, did you see my girl? Neek screamed out. She want Freddy Krueger on in Manoas. Yo ass is the female Rambo, she laughed. You laid that big nigga out. I don't know. Y'all know Tony ass is crazy. You might should have left the shit alone, Shantae added her opinion. Fuck Tony. DeMarcus whipped his ass and you know he don't want it with Ali, I said. I'm just saying, she said. Shit, if you ain't saying shit, I barked. We pulled out the lot and pulled up the street and stopped at the gas station. My hand was starting to hurt like hell, so I asked Neat to pump gas for me. I put $10 in and prepared to hop back in the car. Hey, you want me to drive? Neek asked. I'll be careful. I opened and closed my fist a couple of times. I wasn't sure I could trust her driving skills, but even with the towel wrapped around it, the pressure was killing me. I could tell she really wanted to drive, and since my hand was throbbing, I said, yeah, okay. I climbed in the passenger seat, and as I watched her adjust the seat and mirror, I asked, where the hell was Ivan's ass? You know Tony wouldn't act like that if Ivan was here. Yeah, my man went down to Atlanta for a summer program at Morehouse. He won't be back until next Friday. Oh, yeah, you told me that. So he's going to school down south? We pulled out to Allentown Road and headed for Suitland Parkway, stopping at the light. Not necessarily. He likes the South a lot, though. That shit be hard when he leaves me. Neek lit up when she talked about Ivan. It was heartwarming, and I smiled. But when I saw the sparks light up behind her from the next car, my smile disappeared as my heart dropped. I wanted to scream out, but I was in shock as 4 shots were fired from the car in the next lane. Neek never saw them coming. As my glass shattered, I never even ducked. The car sped off, tires screeching. Bullets intended for me had hit my best friend in the side of her face. I felt the blood and brain matter on my face as Neek was left slumped on the dashboard. Her foot eased off of the brakes and the car drifted a few feet into the median. Brandy was in the back screaming, and Shantae looked as though she was about to have a heart attack. Is she dead? Is she dead? Brandy asked. I didn't answer her. As if Neek and I had shared one heartbeat, I felt her spirit the second it left her body. I leaned over and hugged her tight as I tried to wish her back to life.